January 2017, overnight, dozens of powerful outboard engines vanished from Europe's showroom floors. Officially, the crackdown was about emissions and safety, driven by chilling incidents like a Swedish family stranded 6 hours in the Baltic. But beneath those bans, entire industries collapsed and black markets thrived. What really drove Europe's most dramatic marine purge, and who paid the ultimate price? On November 20, 2013, the European Union signed Directive 2013-53 EU into law, setting in motion a countdown that would change the face of boating across the continent. The text of the directive spelled out in technical language and hard numbers the end for any new outboard engine that could not meet strict limits. 150 grams per kilowatt hour for carbon monoxide, 15 grams per kilowatt hour for combined hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides, and 75 decibels for noise, all measured by standardized ISO test cycles. For manufacturers and dealers, these were not just guidelines, they were the new gatekeepers. Engines without a valid type approval certificate, stamped with the CE mark, would be blocked from sale as new, no matter how much stock remained in the warehouse or on the showroom floor. In the months that followed, industry bulletins and legal notices flowed through the marine sector. Manufacturers scrambled to update their product lines, submitting engines for laboratory testing under the E4 cycle, where every mode from idle to full throttle was scrutinized. Some brands managed to squeeze through by redesigning fuel injection or exhaust systems. But for most classic carbureted two-strokes and early direct injection models, the numbers did not add up. These engines, once prized for their simplicity and punch, now failed to clear the legal bar. Dealers found themselves caught in a tightening vise. The last day to legally place non-compliant engines on the market was January 17, 2017. After that, even brand new units, never run, still in the box, became unsellable as new products. The directive's enforcement mechanism left no room for negotiation. Type approval was absolute. An engine without a current certificate could not be sold, installed, or even marketed as a new unit. The only exceptions were for racing or certain commercial vessels, spelled out in the annexes. National authorities updated their own laws in lockstep, and by mid-2017, every EU member state had adopted the new regime. The pressure on dealers was immense. Inventory lists were cross-checked against approval databases, and engines that failed the new test were recalled, discounted, or in some cases quietly exported out of the region. As the January 18, 2017 deadline approached, the atmosphere inside dealership offices grew tense. Notices from Yamaha, Mercury, Honda, and Evinrude arrived in quick succession, instructing dealers to pull non-compliant models from their floors and prepare for audits. Some manufacturers offered limited buybacks, but most left dealers to absorb the losses. The legal wall was now complete. Any engine lacking a CE mark under Directive 2013-53 EU, or for certain categories, the even stricter Stage 5 Regulation EU 2016-1628 was officially banned from the new market. The era of open shelves and unrestricted choice had ended, replaced by a system where every outboard had to prove itself in the lab before it could ever reach the water. For many in the marine trade, the change was abrupt and absolute. The policies that once seemed distant and bureaucratic had become a hard deadline, enforced with the full weight of law. Engines that had powered generations of boaters were now consigned to the margins, their fate sealed not by mechanical failure, but by the stroke of a pen. August 9, 2014. The Baltic Sea stretched calm and endless, a perfect day for the Sandstrom family's summer escape. Their small boat, powered by twin Yamaha 200 HP Dion outboards, skimmed across the water toward the Swedish archipelago. Children napped under towels, parents shared coffee from a thermos, and the engines purred with the promise of reliability, a reputation Yamaha had built over decades. But as the sun began to dip, a sharp metallic rattle cut through the evening air. One engine coughed, lost power, and died. Within minutes, the second followed. Silence, then only the slap of waves against the hull. The family drifted, stranded miles from shore. Mobile phones flashed low battery warnings. A cold wind picked up, carrying the chill of an August night over open water. As the hours passed, the boat rocked in darkness. The father wrapped his arms around his shivering son, counting the minutes and watching the horizon for any sign of help. 6 hours crawled by. Hypothermia crept in. The youngest child's lips turned blue. When rescue finally arrived, the family was barely able to stand. Local authorities logged the incident as a near miss, one that could easily have ended in tragedy. The official report filed by the Swedish consumer agency, Konsumentverket, cited catastrophic piston failure in both outboards. Mechanics brought in by investigators found melted pistons and injector fault codes stored in the engine control units. The engines had run dangerously lean, a flaw already whispered about in online forums and shop floors across Scandinavia. Yamaha's response blamed misfueling, but independent technicians pointed to a deeper problem, a software mapping that chased emissions compliance at the expense of safe operation under real-world loads. News of the incident spread quickly, igniting public outrage. Headlines warned of exploding engines and families at risk. The story landed on the desks of regulators and politicians who, until then, had seen the new emissions rules as a technical matter. Now the stakes were personal. The Sandstrom family's ordeal became evidence, raw and undeniable, that mechanical failures were not just a matter of inconvenience or cost. For families on the water, a single engine meltdown could mean the difference between a safe journey home and a night that never ends. Dealers fielded frantic calls from owners, and safety probes multiplied. The question shifted from compliance to survival. Could these engines be trusted at all? The answer, for many, would come too late. Klaus Peterson's ledger told the story in numbers and in ink, each line a bruise. On January 19, 2017, he unlocked the glass doors of his Kiel dealership and stared at a showroom lined with engines he could no longer sell. Evinrude E-Techs, Mercury Optimax, Tohatsu TLDIs, 32 units pristine, tags still dangling, all stripped of value overnight. The stock was worth over 100,000 euros on paper, but the market had vanished with the stroke of a Brussels pin. Each morning, Peterson made the same calls. He dialed Evinrude's Hamburg office, then Mercury's distributor, asking for buybacks or credit. The answers were always the same. The engines were now non-compliant, no longer eligible for return or rebate. By the end of January, his notes turned desperate. He logged every customer who walked in, every inquiry about the forbidden models, every time he had to say, "I am sorry, it is no longer legal." The list grew, and so did the silence in the shop. The creditors' letters arrived next, first from the bank, then from the engine suppliers. They demanded payment for inventory that could not be sold, threatening legal action if he failed to clear the debt. His hands shook as he opened each envelope. The council sent a warning about improper stock disposal, hinting at fines if he tried to offload the engines outside approved channels. Peterson's only options were to warehouse the units indefinitely or liquidate them at a loss if he could find a buyer abroad willing to take the risk. By February, the numbers no longer added up. 2 apprentices, both just 19, were called into the small office at the back. He told them the truth. The service bay would close, there was no work, and he could not afford their wages. They packed their toolkits, leaving behind half-finished projects and a sense of betrayal that lingered in the empty workshop. The shop's overhead lights stayed off to save power. Peterson began selling off equipment, diagnostic computers, engine hoists, even the battered coffee machine. Piece by piece, receipts tucked into the same notebook that once tracked orders and sales. In the evenings, Klaus filmed short video diaries on his phone, documenting rows of untouched outboards gathering dust. He spoke in a low voice, careful not to let anger or shame rise above the facts. The engines were not broken, he said. They started, idled, and roared just as they had the day before the law change. But now, they were nothing but liabilities. His business, built over 2 decades, was being dismantled not by competition or poor workmanship, but by a regulation that had turned stock into scrap. Each day, the weight of unsellable inventory pressed harder, and the hope of escape slipped further away. May 2020 arrived with a press release that rippled through the marine world. Bombardier Recreational Products, known as BRP, was halting all Evinrude outboard production. The announcement landed without warning. More than 350 jobs at the Sturtevant, Wisconsin plant vanished overnight, with another 300 positions cut worldwide. The company cited the pandemic as the final blow, but for those on the factory floor, the writing had been on the wall long before lockdowns. The E-Tech G2, once hailed as the future of two-stroke technology, had become a liability. On paper, the G2 was a marvel, with direct fuel injection, oil smart sensors, self-winterizing features, and a promise of near-zero emissions. Launch events in 2014 had shown crowds of dealers and press the polished cowling, the digital dash, and the ease of maintenance. Marketing called it the most advanced outboard ever built. But as engines shipped out, the reality diverged from the brochures. Warranty claims piled up. Owners reported overheating, melted pistons, and oil system failures. Diagnostic lockout became a curse word among mechanics because without proprietary BRP software, even experienced technicians were powerless to fix basic issues. Service bulletins arrived faster than replacement parts. In some regions, more than 1 in 10 G2s saw major repairs within the first 2 years. Dealers struggled to keep up. Training never matched the complexity under the hood. When a G2 failed, the fix often meant waiting weeks for parts or updates that never fully solved the problem. Some customers posted desperate requests online for used circuit boards or injector rails, scavenging eBay for anything that might keep their engines running. Others watched their boats sit idle, unable to find a shop willing or able to take on the work. The warranty department became a revolving door, with claims denied or left unresolved as the company's priorities shifted elsewhere. Inside BRP, engineers watched the collapse with a mix of pride and regret. One recalled that they had built a racing heart into a commuter's body, and they judged it on how it idled, not how it ran all out. The innovation that set the G2 apart, its aggressive fuel mapping and electronically controlled combustion, became the very things that doomed it under European emissions and reliability standards. Elevated warranty rates and mounting costs made the business case impossible to defend. When the closure came, many workers learned their fate from the same press release as the public. Promises of facility repurposing and future innovation rang hollow. Dealers received a short email saying effective immediately, all Evinrude outboards were discontinued. No more orders, no more technical support. Some still had unsold inventory on their floors. Others faced customers demanding answers about orphaned engines. The last G2s rolled off the line in silence. For mechanics and engineers who had spent years mastering the quirks of E-Tech systems, the shutdown felt like erasing a legacy. One technician, laid off after a decade, summed up the mood as best engine I ever sold, or my biggest mistake. In the aftermath, BRP moved to supply Mercury engines instead, leaving Evinrude's century-long run to fade into memory. For the workers, the dealers, and the loyalists who believed in the G2's promise, all that remained were unanswered calls, empty workshops, and engines that became relics the moment the factory lights went dark. Money flowed quietly through Brussels in the years leading up to the ban. Between 2008 and 2013, lobbying registers show that four-stroke engine alliances, led by Yamaha and Honda, spent millions of euros courting policymakers and technical committees. Their stated aim was environmental progress, but internal meeting notes from the European boating industry and the French Nautical Industries Federation reveal a different game. Over croissants and draft legislation, industry representatives pressed for emissions language that favored four-stroke designs. One breakfast meeting in 2012 ended with a handwritten amendment to raise the pass threshold for nitrogen oxide emissions and particulates, a tweak that only the latest four-strokes could reliably clear. Parliamentary transcripts from 2015 show the fallout. Dissenting members of Parliament challenged the objectivity of lab test data, pointing to a 25% gap between certified nitrogen oxide emissions and real-world results for certain models. In one heated session, a German delegate waved independent test reports showing Mercury Optimax engines overshooting legal limits by double digits when run outside the lab. The debate spilled into the press, with critics accusing regulators of letting manufacturers write the rules for themselves. The winners were clear. Brands with compliant four-stroke engines gained a near monopoly, while direct injection two-strokes and challenger firms faced extinction. The new rules, sold as a victory for clean air and safety, also locked out rivals and funneled market share to those who could afford to play the political game. Encrypted chat rooms and private message boards became the new engine showrooms, where usernames traded photos of forbidden outboards and brokers promised delivery within days. Customs memos from 2018 detail a midnight raid in La Rochelle. French officers seized 120 Tohatsu TLD1 engines stacked in a locked warehouse, all lacking the required CE certificates. The engines had arrived by truck, hidden behind crates of fishing tackle bound for buyers across Brittany and the Basque Coast. That haul was only a fraction of the real trade. Investigators estimate at least 6,000 non-compliant outboards move through Europe's shadow market every year, slipping past border checks, changing hands through coded listings on resale forums, and vanishing into marinas from the Algarve to the Adriatic. Margins are staggering. Some brokers, buying up dealer leftovers for pennies on the euro, resell banned engines abroad for up to 80% profit. Telegram groups and encrypted WhatsApp chats connect sellers in Germany and Spain to buyers in Morocco, Senegal, and Ukraine, where environmental rules are looser and demand for raw horsepower runs high. Customs officials track shipments leaving French and Spanish ports, sometimes disguised as parts, sometimes simply misdeclared. In online forums, screenshots circulate of engines offered as vintage or collector's items, a thin cover for ongoing trade. Anonymous mechanics share tips on how to erase serial numbers or spoof compliance stickers, while watchdogs struggle to keep up with shifting routes and aliases. For every engine seized, dozens more slip through, their roar echoing on distant rivers and coastlines. The ban designed to clean up Europe's waters has fueled a thriving gray commerce, where the most dangerous outboards, once outlawed for safety or emissions, find new life far from the reach of Brussels. Today, thousands of banned outboards still trade in Europe's shadows, while regulatory pressure only intensifies. As emissions laws tighten worldwide, the line between innovation and illegality grows thinner. Whether for safety, the environment, or control, these crackdowns redefine what is possible on the water. The next engine to vanish will not be just a machine. It will be a signal of who truly sets the rules offshore.